In our lesson for March the 23rd, we're going to start a series of lessons that are more topical than textual. Now, what we've done so far is textual. That is, we look at a certain text and we explore the ideas in that text. In the next 6 lessons, actually interrupted by our Easter lesson, we're going to look at topics. And these topics will be explored through a number of different verses. So if you look on your outline, you'll see 8 or 10 different passages there that deal with a particular subject. I'm going to try to set the context for the subject, sometime even using some New Testament passages to do that. And then we're going to explore the passages themselves. We won't necessarily look at every single verse, but I'll try to give you some organization for you to be able to teach this lesson, and I'll try to give you some ideas on some of the specific verses that you can make application on. So today we're going to start with a lesson on guarding your speech. In other words, the problem of how we use our speech, how we use our tongue. And I was reminded of a story in a book by Gordon Allport. It's called The Psychology of Rumor. And it tells the story of a Chinese woman who was traveling through Maine at the last part of World War II, 1945. The war was not over yet. Germany had not surrendered. Japan had not surrendered. And this Chinese woman was visiting in Maine. She went to this small village and asked where the location of a certain hilltop was, and they told her. And she was dressed, had her camera around her neck, and she said she wanted to go see what she could see from that peak. So when she left, the man who saw her immediately came to the conclusion that she was a spy, that she was a Japanese spy, although she was Chinese, and that her purpose here was to take photos that would in some way help the Japanese win the war. Now, forget the fact that we're in Maine, which has nothing to do with Japan. Forget the fact that she is Chinese, which is not Japanese, but this was the rumor that started. And Gordon Allport talked about how the least little thing we can pick up on and begin to talk, and then somebody else can hear us. And I'm reminded of the game we played when we were little. Remember gossip, where you would speak in one person's ear and they would speak in the next person's ear, and by the time it got around the circle, it was a totally different message. That's what we're talking about in this lesson. We're talking about rumors and gossip and the misuse of the tongue. And in the book of Proverbs, there are a number of passages that deal with that, but we also see some in the New Testament. And let me lay a foundation in James chapter 3, because I think it'll help clarify some of the specific lessons in our text from Proverbs. So look quickly at James chapter 3, verses 3 through 8. It's one of the clearest expressions of the power of the tongue that we find in the New Testament. James, in his epistle, James chapter 3, illustrates the power of the tongue with a couple of metaphors. The first of these is a bit in a horse's mouth. James 3:3, when we put a bit in the horse's mouth to make them obey, we can turn the whole animal. And James wants us to understand that the horse is a big animal, much bigger than we are. But with the bit in its mouth, we can control its direction. A little thing with great power. And James says the tongue is like that. And then he compares it to a ship. He says, James 3:4, it is like the rudder of a ship. Take a ship, for example, he said. Although they are so large and are driven by winds, they can be steered by a very small rudder. A ship is huge. The rudder is small. How in the world can we control the direction of the ship with a rudder, and yet we can? And so James then makes the application to the tongue and says, just as a bit in a horse's mouth controls the direction of the horse, and a rudder controls the direction of the ship, the tongue has the power to move things and control things. And then you remember James goes on, verse